Hi, everyone. Welcome to True Disabled Story. My name is Nico, and I use he, him pronouns. I'm a white man with blonde hair, large blue and brown spectacles, and a blue flannel button-up underneath a green hoodie. I'm seated against an office wall. Like roughly 25% of Americans and 17% of Philadelphians, I am disabled. And whether we look locally, nationally, or globally, disability communities are full of dynamic, diverse, delightful people with their own stories to tell. All we have to do is listen. Today, I'm joined by Charlotte Batchelor. Charlotte is actually the first person to sit with me for this project, but the questions that I ask will be the same for anyone else. Charlotte, hi, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Uh, Charlotte, what was your path to diagnosis like? Was this a surprise? Was it something you were actively seeking? Paint that picture for us.
So, my path to diagnosis kind of came all at once. I had a very turbulent first semester of college in 2018 that culminated in some severe mental health issues, and I needed help. I was in a really bad spot, so I opted to disenroll from school for about a year, seek mental health treatment. And while I was in the process of seeking mental health treatment, getting my bipolar diagnosis, I was also diagnosed with POTS syndrome. So the impacts my mental health and trauma I had experienced, along with my physical health, my POTS, my migraines, my chronic fatigue, kind of left me. 19 was a rough year for me. I was 19 in 2019. 19 was a very rough year. It was very difficult transitioning to living a life where I was not as independent that I wanted to be, having to rely on family members, not having a lot of friends or supports, or people kind of isolating me because they didn't know how to deal with someone who was sick. So I spent a lot of time in introspection. I found a lot of online supports about the disabled community and about disability justice. And that's where I kind of got my foot in the door. Later on, I would seek out an ADHD and an autism diagnosis. And because I had been through the diagnostic process before, it was a lot easier for me to advocate for myself and to find practitioners who were more inclusive in their diagnosis and understood what neurodivergency looked like in a Black woman in her early 20s. So early on, diagnosis was tough, but I took that opportunity to share my story with people on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, just to raise education and raise awareness, because a lot of my peers, we were talking about mental health, but we weren't talking about what mental health looks like when someone is in crisis, or how to help someone out of crisis, or how to be a good friend to someone who is sick and maybe doesn't have their mobility. And like I was, could not leave the house for several months. I was bedbound. So it was a huge learning experience for not only me, my family, and just my community as a whole. And I really had to learn in that moment how to advocate for myself more so, not only as a Black woman, but as a Black disabled woman, and understanding kind of the compounding stigmas that came with existing in a body like mine. And I think that's what really kind of sparked my activism and my deep interest and passion for disability justice.
Charlotte, thank you. That was a very comprehensive answer. And I really respect that. Um, you got hit with this 1-2 combo, right? POTS and bipolar disorder. And you did what you had to do and you pulled through. So my hat is off to you
Thank
if I
you.
wore a hat. Charlotte, I want to give you some more space to kind of expand on some aspects of your first answer. What impact has your diagnosis or diagnoses rather had on your life? It sounds like it had a fairly significant impact and you had to make major changes.
Mhm. So when I was first diagnosed with bipolar, it was my first time being on any type of serious psychotropic medication. And so we think my pot stemmed from medication mismanagement at the hand of psychiatric practitioners. So I was essentially on this cocktail of things trying to keep me an emotionally whole human being. And I was sick. Like, I was sick as a dog. I was passing out all the time. I had a really scary moment where I passed out when I was in the inpatient facility. I had tardive dyskinesia, so I had really uncontrollable tics and things like that that were super uncomfortable. I was very tired. I had lost a bunch of weight. I was sick and throwing up, and it was just miserable. I went from, being having freedom, being 18, being at your first semester of college, hanging out with friends, taking public transit, doing what people do, to being at home with my mother most of the time and having to rely on my mom for things to, get me to doctor's appointments, help me bathe, help me get dressed, help me advocate for myself, help going to appointments with me and saying, hey, this is the list of medications she's on, is it something further? And me and my mom didn't always see eye to eye, as a lot of mothers and daughters do in teen and adolescent years. But in that moment, me and my mom really had to work as a team. So I was at home most of 2019. I returned to school in the spring of 2020. Um, so I had to talk about, being bipolar and dealing with these horrific mood swings, and explaining my story as someone who has dealt with suicidal ideation before, which a lot of people don't understand, and it can be quite scary for you and quite scary for other people. So um, I learned how to be radically honest with myself in that moment, because it was clear I had limitations, and not just, okay, you studied too hard today, let's take a break. But getting my diagnosis really taught me the importance of hard stops. Like, we cannot go beyond this point. And if you go beyond this point, mentally and physically, it will take a lot to recover. So when I went back to school, I got paired up with, at Michigan State University, the Resource Center for Persons with Disabilities. So I had a great, I guess you could call him like access manager, who helped me. So he would call me, he would look at the doctor's notes, we would have video chats, and we would kind of sit together and put a plan into place on how could I be the most successful when I returned to school. And thankfully, I had switched my major over. I was in a very small liberal arts program, and all of my professors were super accommodating and super understanding. I had like classes with like 20 people or less, and I really got to know the people in my classes. So at least when I returned to school, I had a very um, understanding and caring environment, and I started to kind of meet more people who are more open and understanding about all the disability impacts, and who were a lot more welcoming. But I think when I got my autism and ADHD diagnosis, it kind of put things in perspective. So I got my initial diagnosis in 2020, and then at the end of 2022, I got my ADHD and autism diagnosis. So it was kind of reliving that process. Unfortunately, at that point, my access manager had unexpectedly passed away. I had worked with him 4 years at university, and our disability community was kind of grieving the loss of his loss. But in the spirit of that, the university had created more access managers to work with the rising number of students dealing with different types of neurodivergency. So instead of working with a chronic illness specialist, I got to work with someone who had experience dealing with ADHD, autism, and learning disabilities. So we could focus more on my study habits, using assistive tech to help keep me organized, learning, time management, and kind of keeping everything in check that someone who would be in their last semester of college needed between, interviews and moving out of your apartment and graduation. So really, I had to learn, like I said before, to open my mouth and ask for what I need, or if there was something I didn't need or something that didn't work for me, I would say no. If there was a period where I was feeling depressed and like, hey, maybe I don't want to go out to this tailgate because I'm not feeling up to it, I would tell my friends, hey, I don't want to go out to this tailgate, or thanks for inviting me to the bar, but I don't really like bars. They're overstimulating. And a lot of people respected me for that. And it was kind of cool on social media. I would share days in my life like, hey, I'm someone with a mental health issue. I have to go get my labs checked to make sure my medication's good. Come with me to the student clinic, and this is how you get your blood checked. Or this is my path to finding an autism diagnosis and a responsive practitioner in Michigan. And so just through sharing those glimpses on social media, I met a lot of people, and people started asking questions, not invasive questions, but like, hey, this happened to me. This happened to a friend. Hey, you're on Adderall. What is it like? I'm kind of nervous to bring it up to my doctor. So even in the midst of figuring things out, I was building community with other young disabled people who were also um, figuring things out, and who were excited to hear my story and excited to, hear me share my story, and who were very supportive of what I was doing, and, how I was kind of navigating things.
Charlotte, thank you. That answer was really comprehensive, and yeah, you told that story very well. Indeed, it was a story as you talked about the beginnings of your diagnostic journey, moving from a place of confusion and fear, and then finally moving through to acceptance to even advocating for yourself and others, establishing that social media presence, being that resource of truth and knowledge for others. That's fantastic, man. That not everyone can do that. Let's just say that. So let me ask you, Charlotte. It really seems like, as I get older, as I talk with other disabled people, that disabled life is like flying an airplane, even as you're building the airplane itself. So looking back, what advice would you give people um, on a similar diagnostic journey?
Um, I think I would tell people that it is a life-changing experience. There can be, I will say, I'll go back. When I was initially diagnosed, I was grieving a lot. Like I worked hard to get into the university of my choice. I worked hard to get my scholarship. I fought for my space at this educational institution I really wanted to be at. And I was sad a lot of the times. I felt very isolated, and not only isolated, but dealing with those intense side effects of bipolar, the anxiety attacks, the paranoia. So not only am I alone, but mentally, I feel like I'm trapped in my mind with all of these negative thoughts. So obviously, once I left, the one of the first things I found was I sought out therapy, and there was a lot of grieving too, just trying to find the right therapist and someone who would listen and understand the combination of the mental health issue along with the chronic illness and physical health issues. And I want to tell people it's okay to grieve, especially being 19 at the time. That's still fairly young. And I was not as mature as I was now at 23, almost to be 24 in 2 weeks. And that it's okay to be upset. It's okay to be angry. It's okay. It is totally okay to not want to share everything or want to keep things to yourself. It's okay if you don't want to have a social media presence. It's okay if you just want to keep that conversation between you, your professors, your employer, or your family. Not everyone has to go out here and make a platform and start a podcast or write articles or be like, this is my disabled journey, because not everyone is at that point in their journey. And that's not everyone's, gift or talent or thing they're supposed to be doing. So being okay with understanding your new normal and understanding there are things you are going to miss. Like I missed being around my friends. I missed hanging out with my friends. I missed living in a walkable and accessible community on a college campus. I missed my campus job working at the newspaper. I missed being a journalist. I missed a lot of things. And it's okay to mourn that and understand that just because your life looks different does not mean that's inherently bad. I still graduated from college. I graduated a year ago in 2023 with my Bachelor of Arts. Like I still graduated, totally different majors, totally different field of work, doing totally different things I ever imagined that coming into college. It's okay to mourn the dream you once had, but that doesn't mean there's not going to be a better dream or something different. And even though once you internally accept it, things are still going to be difficult. You will still have flare ups. You will still have things that trigger you and rock you to your core and make things more difficult. So, for example, a year ago, we had a mass shooting at Michigan State during my last semester, and I was on campus. And I essentially was so traumatized, I disassociated for a month. Like my bipolar symptoms were very strong. My chronic illness, my chronic fatigue was up because I was so tense and so anxious. And even though I lived at home for a month and then went back to campus, I still had to deal with night terrors and flashbacks and all of those things right on the cusp of being happy and graduating. So you kind of have to hold grief in one hand and your dreams in the other and learn how to deal with it in whatever way. If that's exercising, if that's venting online, if it's painting, if it's drawing, if it's reading, if it's consuming content, if it's creating content, you kind of have to figure out what works for you, because something will come along and will trigger you and will knock you two, three, four, five, sometimes 10 steps back. But that's just a part of life. Outside of being disabled, life is hard for all of us. people in their late teens, early 20s, and 30s. It's a very confusing, we live in increasingly more difficult and more, I don't know what the word is, more difficult times, I'll say that. So learning how to hold your dreams and hold your grief and make room and space for all of them, I think is important. And then I touched on this before, but the importance of community, having people you can go to and be like, wow, this is really messed up, or wow, I'm really struggling. And having people who can help you hold your grief in that moment, whether you need to vent, whether you need advice, whether you just need someone to sit on the phone to distract you from your own thoughts. I would say one of the best things I had on campus was my best friend lived in an apartment complex 3 minutes away from me. And my mom was with a family member getting surgery the day I was having really bad flashbacks and I was alone in my apartment. And I called my friend up and her mom was just like, come over, we'll make dinner. You can spend the night, we'll watch movies. So in that moment, that small act of just saying like, hey, you're always welcome here. Bring your stuff. We'll take your mind off of this for the evening, really helped me in that moment. So finding whatever community you're a part of, getting involved in community. Um, as I get older, as I continue to do this work, community is the one thing that keeps me grounded and keeps me reminded, even when I feel like I don't want to do the work, or I feel like my voice isn't effective, or I feel like I'm not as far reaching as I want to be.
Charlotte, that's remarkable. Thank you so much. Uh, we're coming to the end of our recorded session. And one question that I ask everybody that I interview for any project is, where can people find you online? This is your chance to really be your own cheerleader, stand up on your own soapbox, share like anything you want to share. If you have any recent wins you want to share, I'd love to hear those. So let's hear it. Promote yourself.
So you can find me on LinkedIn at Charlotte, spelled like Charlotte, North Carolina, Bachelor, spelled like the TV show The Bachelor. I am on LinkedIn. I am on Instagram at Charlotte Says with two S's on the end. If you're interested in my written work, you can go to my website, workwithcharlotteb.weebly.com. The podcast I've done, the written work I've done. Um, Outside of being a disability justice advocate, I have a degree in professional and public writing. So I do accessible tourism work for both the Detroit Visitor and Conventions Bureau. And most recently, I finished a big contract with Pure Michigan. So I do articles around monthly, depending on what's going on. So if you visit Detroit and go to the Detroit Vibes blog, and look up sensory friendly, wheelchair accessible, or just accessible travel. I am their correspondent on all things accessible travel here in Detroit. I'm finishing up a 4-part series with Pure Michigan, which is slated to come out very soon. We're just tying up some loose ends. And if you are interested in traveling to Detroit, Michigan, or anything here in the Metro Detroit region, I'm the founder of a nonprofit called Detroit Accessibility Project, where we have a website where we provide accessible travel information to take the guesswork out of everything. I started it as a sophomore in college in 2021. This is my 3rd year. It's still very small seed because I was a full-time student, and then I was working full-time, took a break from full-time work, but I'm hoping to get back at it. But if you're looking to visit Detroit, I'm kind of a resource on that type of thing. I post about autism and the intersection of disability, race, justice, and gender, both on LinkedIn. On Instagram, it's a little bit more personal, a little bit more laid back because it isn't on Instagram. So I post videos, I post infographics, I do different stuff, and that is where you can find me on the internet.
That's fantastic. Charlotte, thank you so much for helping me. I really appreciate it. I couldn't have asked for a better guest to kick off this project with. Thank you again.
Thank you.